Hey, that's not Rover. If you're unable to tell from looking at your screen, I managed to get into the first closed beta test for Silverpalace, and as someone who has been patiently waiting for this game ever since its first announcement, you can bet that I was pretty excited when I found out. But after 10 hours of beta gameplay, what are my first impressions on the game? That's what this video is going to be about. Now, first of all, remember, this is only the first closed beta of the game, meaning that the game is very incomplete, which means there's most likely a ton of missing features, the story is only very short at this current moment, and there's only 7 playable characters available. So, you really cannot look at this game and the footage on the screen right now and judge if you like the game or not. You're really gonna have to wait until closed beta 2, or even the release of the game to judge the game fully. And that's why everything in this video that I'm going to talk about is primarily going to be about the broad strokes and the mechanics of the game. I'm not going to dive much into specifics because I can fully see the specifics changing. Now, my first day on this beta was primarily spent doing the story that is currently available, playing the combat of the game, and exploring what is currently available of the open world, which also means I got to really test out the movement mechanics. And I want to talk a bit about the exploration first, because this is where most of my pain points with the game lie. The traversal of the characters is fine, it's really just kinda basic. You have a walk and you have a sprint. There's also a grapple, which is nice, and you can vault over small objects. There's really not that much revolutionary going on here. However, what I find odd for a game with such a vertical open world, it's the fact that there's no jumping and not any sort of climbing whatsoever. So if you want to go up somewhere, you're really gonna want to fly there on your flying horse, or you're gonna need to pack it up and find some stairs. This is really weird as a decision in my opinion, because a ton of the chests and collectibles are found on the roofs. Now here's the issue with that. If you fall off the roof by any chance, you're gonna have a bit of a difficult time going back up, and that's kind of an annoyance. Especially since exploration is a pretty big part of the game that even Elementa Games wants us to interact with for this beta test. And this is pretty annoying in my opinion. And that's not where my problems with the exploration end. You see, part of the exploration progress in each area is having to collect materials. Now obviously I'm no stranger to my open world gacha game asking me to collect some flowers. But the issue is that these flowers are used for character ascension, which means you only have to grab them if there is a character that needs to be ascended using those flowers. Meanwhile in Silverpalace, it's part of the exploration progress, which is pretty annoying, especially when these materials are often pretty hard to see. As beautiful as the game looks, and as good as the lighting is, it oftentimes makes it hard for you to notice the shiny glimmer that indicates that an object can be picked up, because the lighting in this game is very vivid and bright. So ultimately, it's gonna become a little bit hard to notice when there's a material you can pick up, even if it's almost next to you. It also doesn't help that in many of the areas there is over 40 materials you can grab, which means that if you want to get 100%, it's gonna be a bit of a problem. This is something I expect them to remove in the next beta test, but currently it's just kind of annoying. However, that's still not where my issues with the exploration end, because this horse is a nightmare at times. Riding the horse on the ground, fine. It has a cool drift, and sure, maybe I wish it would go a little bit faster, but overall, horse is fine, on the ground at least. But the second you try to fly this thing, and you try to land anywhere, oh my days. That's when you start having to actually get a degree in flying an airplane to actually land where you want to land. Like I said, a lot of the exploration in this game takes place on rooftops, which means you want to land on, shocker, the roof. And guess what, bozo? The roof isn't always big, which means that if you want to try and land on a small roof, which, let me tell you, sometimes was required to actually get the chest there, good luck. There's no helipad for you to land on, you're just gonna have to feel for it. And the second you think you have a perfect landing, the horse just keeps walking. The momentum doesn't stop, which means that even if you get a near perfect landing, the horse will just walk off. And if it walks off, you're gonna have to do the whole thing over again. And guess what? Gravity exists, so you're going down. And the only way to go back up is if you have enough stamina to do an aerial boost. And if you don't, you're just gonna fall. And you're gonna get into the exact same situation I was mentioning earlier on in the video, where if you fall, it's gonna be a chore to get back up, because this game has neither jumping nor climbing. So I feel that either the horse trying to land should become a lot smoother and the momentum should stop a lot quicker, or they just add some kind of jumping or climbing to the game. Next up, I want to talk a bit about the combat system. And this also sort of is going to include the gearing system, because the gear is actually rather important for one of silverpalace's combat mechanics. Now, to describe silverpalace's combat, the best thing I can say that will make people understand it is it's sort of a mix between Wuwa and Zenless. So, first of all, you got your basic attacks, and then you also got your charge attacks. For charge attacks, you can actually charge them up, because there's 2 levels of charge to it. The second charge level will basically always just be more damage, because I have yet to see a character that actually leverages the fact that charge attacks can charge. Maybe Cinderella does that, because you can only get her on day 2 of the beta, and it's still only day 1, but currently, I don't think there's a single character that can abuse that. Now here's where the interesting part kicks in. So, skills in this game work a bit differently from Wuwa, which I'm assuming most people are familiar with, because I'm primarily a Wuwa channel. So skills, instead of using cooldowns, will use a certain gauge that is unique for each character. Think of it like a forte bar. The standard button to use a skill is your right mouse click, so this time you don't use your skill by pressing E. This is also where one of the Zenless comparisons comes in, because in Zenless your EX special also does not have a cooldown, and instead will simply use energy, so you're only reliant on the amount of energy that you have. Which is similar to Silverpalace and the certain gauge. However, in Silverpalace, your gauge can't overcap, so the second that you notice that you're full on your gauge, you're gonna want to use your skill. Then there's your ultimate, which just functions similarly to Wuwa again, where you have a certain amount of max energy, which you cannot overcap on, and when you're filled out on your energy, you just use your ultimate, which will have a unique effect for each character, obviously. Now the reason I compare it to Wuwa and not Zenless is because Zenless's decibel system works off more than just simply attacking, whereas with Silverpalace, it's basically just when you attack an opponent. Then there's 3 more things you're able to do in combat. You can roll, you can parry, and you can execute the enemy. Now to start with the execute mechanic first. Each enemy has a stun bar, kind of like Daze in Zenless, or kind of like Off-Tune in Wuthering Waves. Now I think the Wuthering Waves comparison is better here, because in Zenless when you stun an enemy, they will become stunned for a prolonged period of time, which increases your damage. Whereas in Wuthering Waves, you just get 1 tick of damage out of it, and then they immediately recover. So it's a lot more like Toon Break in Wuthering Waves than it is like Daze in Zenless. However, the reason I bring up Zenless here in the first place is because of how the characters work. Some characters simply have higher stun damage than other characters. Because, for example, Lauren does way more stun damage than the detective. This kind of mirrors stun characters in Zenless that want to build for impact and have higher daze multipliers. And then for the roll and parry, they kinda speak for themselves. They are your defensive options. Parry is higher risk, higher reward, and your roll is your lower risk option. You're able to roll by double pressing shift and holding a certain direction, which will allow you to roll away from the enemy. And if you get good timing on your roll, there will be a brief slowdown effect, but it doesn't last long. So ultimately you're able to get out of the way, and if you manage to time it correctly, you get a small little bonus out of it. However, with your parry you're taking much more of a risk, because the way you parry is you have to stand still and press the shift button, which means that it's a more tight input, and if you miss it, you do actively get hit. But if you parry successfully, you do a chunk of damage to the opponent. This means that parries have more offensive benefits than rolling. And that's all when it comes to things that you specifically input for, because there is also another mechanic called an ambush. This is very similar to intro skills in Wuwa. You have to attack enemies to get silver drip, and when you have enough silver drip, you will be able to perform an ambush attack by swapping into a different ally, and an ambush attack will almost always give you full gauge to use your skill. So if you want to swap into your support in order to use your skill to refresh buffs, it's usually gonna be through an ambush. Ambushes are also used to trigger the gearing system for Silverpalace, being catalysts. You're able to equip 3 catalysts on your characters, each of which having a unique effect, which are usually tied to using an ambush skill. I say usually because it's not a universal rule, but it is most of the catalysts that I've encountered so far. Some catalysts will give you a shield, some catalysts will heal you, other catalysts will give you damage bonuses, etc. But most of them are triggered through using an ambush skill, which means that you're most likely gonna want to answer your DPS with an ambush skill as well. Not only because it allows you to use your skill, but also because of the damage buffs associated to catalysts. However, ultimately, I think that Silverpalace's combat system is incredibly free-flowing. I would compare the overall combat flow a lot more to Zenless than I would compare it to Wuwa. Wuwa's combat system, outside of quick swapping, is a lot more rigid, because things like outro skills and certain sets means you want to use certain characters' outro skills into certain characters' intro skills. For example, it's really hard to do a Lene rotation without using her intro skill. However, Silverpalace is a lot more free-flowing in that system. Because you're able to store up to 3 ambush attacks, it means you're able to swap into 3 characters in quick succession in order to do their thing. There's also actually no downside to swapping out. So if you need to very quickly set something up, you can just swap to your support, do their thing, and then go back to whatever other character you wanted to get into. Enemies in Silverpalace are also very aggressive. They attack you almost constantly, and your characters very rarely have interruption resistance. The solution to this is parrying, because almost every single attack in the game is parryable. Unlike Wuwa or Zenless, where it's only some attacks you can parry, Silverpalace gives you the opportunity to parry almost anything. And if you're good at parrying, this means you're able to get quite a good chunk of damage on the enemy when they're just trying to attack you. And while parries don't interrupt the enemy, you are able to very quickly cast another parry after having just done a successful parry, meaning you're able to chain multiple parries in a row, and that gets you quite a good amount of damage. So ultimately, I'm very happy when it comes to Silverpalace's combat system. Now, for the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about some miscellaneous things that I noticed about the game. First of all, when it comes to the story, which, don't worry, I'm not going to talk too much about the story, I'm glad that they are very much leaning into the detective vibe. You really are playing as a detective, and most of the events in the story do revolve around your identity as a detective, which means that there's also very naturally a mystery element at play. And for people like me who likes to theorize and look at things like foreshadowing, it means that either I get the catharsis of being right, or I notice the details that the game is setting up, and I'm able to look back at those moments and be happy that I noticed those things because it made the reveal make a lot more sense. However, ultimately, I do think that the game's story might be harder to buy into if you're not someone who's able to pick up on small clues. Another miscellaneous thought is that the endgame currently is incredibly easy. They did give us an endgame mode, but I'm pretty sure it's just a placeholder, because let me paint a picture for you here. The first time I went into the endgame, I had a team of level 20 characters, and none of them had weapons except for the detective, who had one that they literally give you for free at the beginning of the game. Not only that, but I also had barely any catalysts, and if that wasn't enough, I was using a team of only 4 stars and the detective. I did not have Cynthia yet, and at the time of recording, Cinderella is not available yet, so I was running literally an entirely free comp. I managed to make a complete joke of the game until stage 4, And then when I got to stage 4, I decided to level up my skills, a singular time. Then I went at it again, and I managed to get to stage 7. Why am I able to go to a stage with level 50 enemies when my characters are still level 20 using not even a weapon? Like, my detective is still the only character in my team that actually has a weapon equipped because I haven't even unlocked any others. Obviously, when the game is out, you would get 3-star and 4-star weapons through the gacha. But guess what, bozo? The gacha isn't implemented yet, so we have to get them through other sources in the beta, which we have to specifically seek out, which I haven't done yet. So I'm still running a team where only one of my characters actually has a weapon equipped, and I'm able to fight level 50 enemies. This is way too easy. It's so easy to a point where I think that this is just simply a placeholder. This is not meant to be the final product, and they purely put this thing here so that the beta testers would have something to do. Anyway, with that rant over, it's time to talk about something else, which are the detective mechanics, which is what I'm going to call them. There are a couple of things in the game to really make you feel like you are playing as a detective. There's an evidence board system, and there's also the system to investigate other characters. Now, in the story, sometimes you'll be prompted to investigate a certain character, but you're also able to investigate certain objects and people on the street. Now, my issue with this is that this is basically never really used for anything practical. Trying to investigate any sort of object will only give you a niche bit of lore, or just some fluff text that really doesn't add much to the world. Sure, some people will find it nice, but I personally don't care about it. My issue is more so with the investigating people on the street, because the game will literally tell you when there is a suspicious person nearby for you to investigate. And then you just hold your right-click button at them, and then you can start a fight. Which, it's not a bad mechanic per se, I just think it feels kind of underutilized. Because basically all it is the game tells you there's someone suspicious nearby, then you'll hold the right-click button and you can start a fight. Because there's two schools of thought. Either one, you want to actually feel like a detective and you feel like the game is cheating you out of that feeling, or two, you're just adding unnecessary layers to trying to start a fight. So ultimately, you're either wasting people's immersion or you're wasting people's time. Silverpalace already has a mechanic that you're able to shoot thugs on the streets to initiate combat with them. It's only the monsters that are disguising themselves. So the solution to me seems very simple. You can simply add in the options a sort of way for people to skip this whole investigation gimmick. Because then you can simply have the suspicious NPCs have a red outline on them and allow players to shoot them directly. However, if you want the immersion of feeling like a detective, they can just not have that red outline, and instead, their model will reflect that they are suspicious. For example, if they are a werewolf, you're able to see that their hands look more like claws, and then you can investigate them the same way that you can investigate a playable character during the main story. This way, players that just want to fight enemies can stop wasting their time, and people who want to roleplay as a detective can feel rewarded for being observant and looking at suspicious people. But those are just my first impressions of the Silverpalace closed beta. Let me know what you think of the game so far down in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to join my Discord server, which is linked down below. And if you're just interested in seeing more of me as a person, you can also check out a different link in the description below. But that'll be all from me. Peace.